Hey everybody, this is the first time and probably the last time that I'm ever going to make a tier list for this game. So, I'm going to do this on the best weapons for team objective. So, this entire tier list is going to be based on my opinions on the best weapons for the team objective game mode. Now let's get into it. Hope you guys enjoy. Alright, so let's just go down the list. No specific order. I'm just going to go left to right, and we're going to see what we get here. So first off, the one-handed axe. One-handed weapons in general don't do too well in 1vx situations, but they are good in 1v1 situations. So we're going to put the axe in C tier because TO is very chaotic, and while you can do good with pretty much any weapon in TO if you're careful enough, the axe just doesn't have the range to compete with a lot of other weapons on this list. Second off, the battle axe. Also a very short weapon, but it has very solid drags, which a lot of one-handers don't have, and that kind of brings it a little bit higher up for team objective. And it also does a lot of stamina damage and a lot of damage in general. So for the battle axe, I'm going to put it on B tier. You can do very well with the battle axe, and you can really clean up a back line if you get a nice little flank. But I just feel like it falls a little short compared to war axe, which is definitely a lot better than the battle axe for TO. Here you see the longbow. Put that in the actually bad category. The archer is just a plague on this game, and let's just do this. Next weapon is the crossbow. Also bad. Don't use it. You're not playing the game right if you're using this stuff. Next we have the cudgel. This is one that I'm also going to put in actually bad because it just does such bad damage, and it has no range. Even if you're using this weapon on ambusher and getting backstabs, you're still looking at 4 hits to kill somebody. And if you're using this on a weapon that's not ambusher, you're looking at 5 or 6 hits to kill somebody. It's just not worth it. It's not a good secondary. It's not a good primary. Don't use this weapon at all. Next we have the dagger. I'm going to put the dagger in C tier. And let me tell you why. Even on ambusher, the dagger is not your best option. It is very short. It only does good damage if you can backstab somebody, and usually only with a special attack are you actually getting anything worthwhile with this. It does a lot of damage with a special attack to the back, but it doesn't even have cleave. You can only hit one person at a time with it. If you're looking to get high kill games, this isn't the weapon that it's going to be good with. You can get high kill games with it, but you're mainly just going to be stabbing people in the back who are one shot. So yeah, not really worth it if you're looking for high kills. Next we have the Danax. I'm going to go ahead and put the Danax as our first weapon in A tier. I was gonna go S, but it's kind of like the battle axe, but it has a few more perks than the battle axe. With the Danax, you get insane throwing damage. You can get like 110 damage with this weapon off of a throw, which just makes it unbelievably strong. Also, I think it is a bit faster than the battle axe too. And it has the increased movement speed being on Vanguard, and you can have 2 of them. If you are playing Vanguard, you can literally just have 2 on your back, throw 1, and then you have another backup. It's really good, and a lot of its attacks are too fast to react to. You can't counter a lot of the attacks on this weapon. So the Danax A tier. Moving on, we have the Executioner's Axe. I am also going to put the Executioner's Axe in A tier. And here's why. The Executioner's Axe is very similar to the Highland Sword and it's very good in TO for that same reason the Highland Sword is good in TO. You get extremely long sweeping attacks that can, get 5 people in one swing. It has very solid damage. The overhead's not amazing, and the stab is not good, which is why it's only an A tier. But actually, you know what? I think I changed my mind here a little bit. I think I'm going to put the Executioner's Axe in B tier, above the Battle Axe. And here's why. Just the stab is not good, and the overhead's not great. Pretty much all it has going for it is a slash, You can get a really solid sweep in there, but I think there are better weapons for TO. It used to be really good when the game first came out. It was actually broken, but it's been nerfed multiple times at this point. So, B tier I think is where it should be. Next, we have the Falchion. The Falchion is better than the Axe for one-handed weapons, but I'm still going to put it in C tier. Above the Axe, though, it has kind of a good drag. It's almost like a one-handed version of the Messer, so it's got that going for it. But still, you're not going to have much success in a 1vx with the Falchion. And now let's go to the next one. We have the Glaive. Now, the Glaive is... I'm going to put it in C tier behind the Dagger, actually. And here's why. The Glaive has bad damage. You can still make it work, and you'll get a lot of assists with this weapon. You'll get like plus 50, plus 50, plus 50, plus 50. But you're not going to get a lot of kills. Because, if you get in a 1vx and you're stuck with this weapon, you're going to hit each person in that 1vx 5 times, and you're not going to kill any of them. You're gonna die, and they're still going to be like half health. So for that reason, it's going to be in C tier. It's got really long range and really, really fast attacks, which makes it okay in a dueling situation. It's almost like a polearm version of a longsword in a duel. You can definitely do good in a duel with this weapon, but in TO, you are just stuck just getting assists and getting hit markers, and that's not what you're looking for. Next up, we have the Greatsword. Now, the Greatsword is going to be our first S tier weapon for Team Objective. And here's why. So, the Greatsword has very long attacks, very good drags, good excels. The only thing it doesn't have is a good stab. But the overhead excels and drags and all of that sweeping attack potential makes up for the less than good stab, in my opinion. So the Greatsword is well known to be one of the best weapons in TO. If you go into a TO lobby, you will see a lot of Greatswords. It's just that good. And I can go on and on about how the Greatsword is one of the best weapons in the game for Team Objective. But I don't want this video to be too long, guys. I want to get through it as quickly as I can. Greatsword is a top tier TO weapon. If you have not tried it or you're sleeping on it, I know it's one of the first weapons you get in the game. You just got to use it. Here we have the Halberd. The Halberd is also going in S tier. I'm going to put it behind the Greatsword, though. The Halberd is probably second to the Greatsword, to be honest. It has longer range. It has amazing stabs and overheads. You can reach over your own teammates consistently. And if you play this weapon right, you're going to go deathless, or you're going to have very low deaths very often. The Halberd is gotta be one of the best weapons in TO. Not amazing in duels. You can make it work in duels, obviously. You can make anything work in this game. But for Team Objective, the first weapon you unlock in the game is S tier. And that's saying a lot. Next we have Hatchet. It's bad. I'm going to put it above the Cudgel. You can do decent with this weapon. It has shorter range than the Cudgel, actually, but it does actually pretty decent damage. You can two-shot a knight with the hatchet, but it's just the bad range and the fact that if you get in a 1vx, you are dead. You can't beat anybody in a 1vx with the hatchet, same as with the cudgel. Next we have my all-time favorite weapon, but it has fallen from grace in the past few months. The heavy mace. A couple months ago I would have been happy to put this on S tier, but they did nerf the slash. The slash used to be so fast that you couldn't react to it, and you were forced to take a hit on your block. So it's going to have to go in A tier. Unfortunately, there are just gambles that you could have done a couple months ago that you can't really do anymore. Because if you slash, you have that extra half second or whatever of added wind-up time. So it just makes the weapon a lot more gambleable, a lot worse. And unfortunately, even though it's my favorite weapon of all time, it's got to go in A tier, not S tier. Next we have the heavy cavalry sword, guys. One of the newer weapons to release. A lot of people don't know how to play this weapon or don't use it, but I've put a lot of hours on this weapon recently. And although it is a one-handed weapon, I like to think of it as a combination of a one-handed sword and a one-handed spear. It has extremely long drags and especially long stab drags. You can reach people pretty far with it. So I know I said I was probably going to put most one-handed weapons on B tier or C tier, but the cavalry sword is going to go up to B tier. I'm actually going to put it above the battle axe, and I'll let you know why. It's just the drags. It has the drags of a two-handed weapon. Even though it's a one-handed weapon, it has a very, very solid counter window, which is the time that you have before you can counter something in the correct moment. And it's just a good, solid, all-around one-handed weapon. The damage is a little low, but you're not always worried about how much damage you're doing in team objective. To an extent you are, but you can work with this weapon, trust me, especially if there's a lot of vanguards on the other team. You're still three-shotting vanguards, especially if you're doing heavy attacks. And also the special attack on the cavalry sword is very good. It looks just like an overhead, and it's very hard to read, and it comes out pretty quick. The cavalry sword has a lot more range than people give it credit for, and that's why I'm putting it in B tier. Next we have the Highland sword. I'm going to put this in B tier as well. I'm going to put it above the Executioner's Axe, and this is why. The cavalry sword is almost like a worse version of the great sword. It's slower than the great sword. The recovery time is ridiculous, but it has the best drags in the game. You can drag this thing around so well that your character starts to desync and nobody can read when it's actually going to hit them. It's one of the trickiest weapons in the game. It actually has a very high skill ceiling now because they nerfed a lot of the things that made it broken. I remember when this weapon first came out, everybody used it. Every lobby was stacked with Highland swords because why wouldn't it be? It was better than the great sword in every way. But the way that they nerfed it actually just made it not good until people actually learn how to use it again. But now it's retaken some of its spot back after I've seen a lot of people use it. It's a weapon that if you know how to use it correctly, you can do very well with it. But if you miss an attack, you're screwed. You cannot miss an attack with this weapon. If you miss, you are going to get punished because it takes a very long time to recover and get back into a defensive position. So moving on, Javelin. I'm going to put Javelin again. It's an archer class. I'll put it above the crossbow because, you know, at least you can melee with it. But no, we're not playing that game. Katars are terrible. I'm putting Katars lowest on the list. I mean, do I even have to say more? It's the worst weapon in the game, hands down. You can't do anything with it. You literally can attack somebody and they don't flinch whatsoever, and then you just get destroyed. The only way you can kill somebody with this weapon is if they're sleeping, basically, or if you get behind them and you can hit them 6 times before they notice you. But no, terrible weapon. The knife, another terrible weapon. It's a good secondary weapon, don't get me wrong, but it is going to go above the cudgel, actually. I'm going to put it above the cudgel in the bad category, because although it is worse than the cudgel in terms of most things, it actually is extremely fast. And the cudgel is actually really slow for a one-handed weapon that's this bad. But the knife is very good at gambling, which, you know, gamblers run this game. If you are bad at switching to your secondary, I would use the knife, because it comes out extremely quickly and you can start defending or attacking as much as you want. But yeah, it's a bad weapon, but you can make it work much better than the cudgel or the guitars, that's for sure. Next up, we have the longsword. I'm going to put the longsword in S tier behind the other two, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's one of the fastest two-handed weapons in the game, and it has the best stab in the game, hands down the best stab in the game for a two-handed sword weapon. You can just run around the battlefield, look for people who are slightly half health or lower health, and just run through them and slay so well with this weapon. I don't know how much more I can even say about it. The overheads, the slashes, the stabs, they're all so fast on the Excel that you cannot react to it. You can attack cancel instantly with this weapon. You can just do triple feints as much as you want. It's one of the hardest weapons to read, and it's also, when you get good with it, it is the most fluid weapon in the game. I don't put that many hours on this weapon, but I do occasionally, and every time I use it, I cannot play badly with it. You can't get a bad score with this weapon. I've tried. You can just roam through so many team fights and do well with it. It does struggle a little bit in the damage department, so when you don't want to get stuck in a 1vx with this weapon, because you're gonna get destroyed. No easy way to say it. It just doesn't do enough damage to compete in a lot of 1vx situations. But you can win with it in a 1vx. But usually, if you're fighting 2 or 3 people, you're trying to get out of there. You want to get off a counter and run away. But when people aren't seeing you coming, or if you're in a team fight, the longsword is an excellent option. Okay, next we have the mace / Morningstar. We're also going to put these in C tier, but I'm going to put them at the highest point in C tier. And here's why. The Morningstar is a knight destroyer, obviously. It's like a slightly worse version of a Warhammer, if you think about it. The Warhammer is better than the mace for team objective, but you can still do very well with this weapon. It can 3-shot a Vanguard, 2-shot a Knight with heavy attacks. You know, it's extremely fast. The stab is actually one of the fastest stabs in the game. Not a lot of people know that. It has very fast combo times, but it's just, you know, you can't 1vx with it. You can't 1vx with it, and it has poor range. So although you're going to be very good at killing specific targets within the fight, that's not what we're really looking for in team objective. We're looking for weapons that can kill a lot of people really quickly. Next, we're going to have the Maul. The Maul is going to go in B tier, but I am going to put it below. I'm going to put it below the Battle Axe. Here's why. So the Maul, if you practice it a lot, you can do very well with it. It has a pretty high skill ceiling, but it struggles from the weaknesses of the Battle Axe in that it has incredibly short range, but it also suffers from the weakness of the Highland Sword in that it has a really poor recovery time. So you can kill somebody in one shot, sure, but if you miss your attack, you're going to take a hit. And you're very likely to miss an attack because it has poor range. It's almost like a two-handed version of the Warhammer. It can one-shot somebody, but you're not likely to hit them unless they're pushing you, or since you're on Vanguard, you're running really fast on Vanguard, you have a very solid chance of getting behind somebody. But since you're on Vanguard, of course, you have a low health pool, so you're likely to get murdered by people who are looking to target you. So yeah, it could be a good weapon, especially if you can catch a lot of people into it in a drag. You can, like, do that big bonk, 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 bonk across a bunch of people. But it's just not that likely, and you put yourself in a very dangerous position doing that. Unless you're like an expert flanker, Maul's not going to be for you. Moving on. Next we have the Messer. I'm going to put the Messer in S tier. I am going to put it below the Longsword, though. Now, the Messer is below the Longsword because it's a lot slower than the Longsword. It actually has the same moveset as the Longsword, but it just looks so freaky, and it's so much slower than the Longsword that it tricks a lot of people. The overheads look so janky that most people just won't be able to read them accurately, and they're just going to take hits when they don't need to. I'm putting it in S tier specifically because it has such wonky drags, and it also does a lot of damage. It does way more damage than every weapon in S tier so far. You can do like 80 damage on a heavy overhead, or 90 damage on a heavy overhead, or something stupid like that. It just does so much work in the cleanup potential, and it's so hard to read that a lot of people just miss their counters on it. That's why it's going up here, guys. Next we have, I think this is the one-handed spear. Yeah, this is the one-handed spear. I'm going to put this... this is a tough one. I don't use the one-handed spear much, to be honest with you. I'm going to put it in B tier, though. I'm going to put it below the Cav Sword. Now, I might be wrong about this one, because I don't use the one-handed spear very much. But I do not like that you can only do a stab and an overhead with it. It's very easily readable. It's very easy to dodge. It's very predictable. In a 1v1 situation, it's very strong. It's very good at gambling, but it doesn't have the 1vx capabilities, and it also doesn't have that great range. The strongest thing you're going to see with the one-handed spear is the special attack. Special attack will destroy people because it looks just like a heavy stab, and it has very good range. My problem with it, of course, is just that you can't 1vx with it. If you get 2v1, you're done. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. It has good damage. Nothing wrong with the damage, really. It's just not flexible enough. And in TO, you need to be flexible. Next, we have the pickaxe. I'm actually going to put the pickaxe... I'm going to put the pickaxe above the Morningstar. It's a little redundant. It's a little redundant, sure. The Morningstar, the mace, and the pickaxe are all pretty much the same weapon, but the pickaxe has a couple advantages. The pickaxe is an axe, so you have a slight chance to disarm somebody, which you can't do with these other two weapons. But the pickaxe also has a faster overhead than the other two, and a little bit of a weaker stab. But overheads, as we know, are the best attacks in the game. So the fact that it has a better overhead than these two, or a faster overhead, harder to react to on an Excel, makes it better. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it. It has a better overhead, therefore it is better than these two. But you're stuck with it on Engineer, unfortunately. Next we have the poleaxe. I'm going to go ahead and put the poleaxe in A tier, above the Danax. So, the poleaxe, I do like the poleaxe. It's one of my favorite weapons, but it does lack diversity in attacks. If you're playing poleaxe, you're pretty much just going to be stabbing and overheading the whole time, and it's not good in a 1vx, and it also doesn't have the range of the halberd. I think of the poleaxe as the halberd on knight. It's shorter than the halberd. It does do, I believe it does slightly better damage than the halberd. I could be wrong about that. And it's also a little bit faster than the halberd. So it's faster and shorter than the halberd. And the slashes are really bad. The slashes on this thing are so short that you need to be face-hugging people to hit them with the slashes. So you're stuck with a weapon that pretty much only has a stab and an overhead. And while those stabs and overheads and that special attack is very long range, don't get me wrong, but you only have 2 attacks. And the stab's not that strong. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with a really good overhead. And that's pretty much all you need sometimes in TO, which is why I'm putting it in A tier. It lacks a little bit of flexibility, but it also has, don't forget, it also has that stamina negation perk, that like 20% stamina negation perk that they never remove. Yeah, it's almost like you have a shield on too with this weapon. You're very unlikely to run out of stamina. So you have a great defense and you have a solid attack. And that's sometimes all you need to support your team and team objective. You can just continuously overhead near your teammates in the team fight, and you're going to do very well. The overhead is just so good that it needs to be an A tier. Next, we have the pole hammer. Now, a lot of people think the pole hammer is one of the best weapons in the game. I have to disagree. The pole hammer is solid. Don't get me wrong, but the pole hammer, it's a blunt weapon. You know, it's kind of short for a pole arm. It does very good damage to knights, and of course, knights the most played class in the game. I am going to put it in A tier, but I'm putting it at the end of A tier, below the heavy mace. So it has a decent stab, amazing overhead. They did nerf the slash. They used to be able to handle hit with the slash. Can't do that anymore. So I'm putting it at the end of A tier, but it really could be in B tier. It could be in B tier. It has a decent defense, good counter windows, but just the fact that it's not good in a 1vx because it doesn't cleave, that really kind of puts it lower than the other weapons. And I know the heavy mace doesn't cleave either, but the heavy mace has stamina negation and it's extremely fast, and it just has a good counter window, and it's got a good stab too. It's got everything going for it really besides the cleave. So that's why I have the heavy mace this high up. This weapon is similar to a heavy mace, to be honest. That's why it's kind of here. But yeah. Next up, the quarterstaff. Now the quarterstaff is better now. Believe it or not, the quarterstaff is better than it used to be. It used to be terrible because it was on knight. But now the quarterstaff is on footman, which makes it much better because the footman has a lot more dodging capabilities. You get a dodge buff on footman. I don't know if you know that, but you can dodge more with less cooldown on footman. So you have a lot more movement capabilities with this weapon now. But it's pretty much just an overhead, just like the poleaxe, but it's also shorter, it doesn't have cleave. So you have one good attack, the special attacks butt, the slash is ass, the stab is ass, you have an overhead, that's it. So for that reason, I'm going to put it at the end of B tier. No, actually, it's going at the end, at the top of C tier. You can make it work. You can make most weapons work. But it's just not that good. It's really not. You can't 1vx with it. I'm putting it above these ones because it does have stamina negation. You can't underestimate stamina negation. You can survive for a long time with it, but you are screwed in a 1vx. I'm putting it above these two. These ones also because it is one of the best dueling weapons in the game. I mean, I know they did nerf the stamina negation, but it is still an extremely solid dueling weapon, and you cannot take that from it. Next, we have the rapier, guys. Best dueling weapon in the game, hands down. But this isn't a dueling tier list. This is a TO tier list. And because of that, it's got to go lower. I'm putting it in C tier. And I'm putting it pretty much at the end of C tier. It's better than the dagger, it's better than the glaive, but it's worse than the axe and all these other weapons in C tier. Because it's one of the only swords that doesn't have cleave. It does very low damage on everything except for the stab. The stab does really high damage. And yeah, you can't 1vx with it at all. It doesn't have cleave, and you need cleave on a one-handed for sure if you're going to 1vx in this game. And it just does low damage. You're never going to outstamp somebody with it. You're going to win 1v1s. Like I said, best 1v1 weapon in the game. Just not for TO. Next, we have the short sword. I'm going to put it in C tier above the rapier. I know it's short, but it's fast, and it cleaves. And that's important. It doesn't do enough damage to be better than any of these other weapons, but it's solid for as short as it is and as much of a secondary weapon as it is. It's a solid secondary choice, but you're not going to want to wield this into battle, you know? You're not going to want this to be your primary weapon, so it's going to stay in C tier. Next, we have the shovel. I'm putting the shovel below the pickaxe, but better than these two. The shovel is very fast. It's strong. It's a good blunt weapon, but it's shorter than the pickaxe, I believe. No, maybe not shorter than the pickaxe, but it doesn't do as much damage as the pickaxe. I personally don't like the shovel. I know it's fast and strong, but it's just too short for me. I can't do it. Let's move on here. This video is running a little bit longer than I wanted it to. Yeah, this one's easy. Bad. Actually bad. No. We're not doing the siege crossbow, guys. Not going to do it. I'm not talking about it. Sledgehammer. I like the sledgehammer better than I like the shovel, so I'm putting it above the shovel in C tier. It's a little bit... It's almost like a very, very short version of the two-handed hammer, and that's why I like it. It's a decent weapon. You're not going to get very high kill streaks with it. You're not going to 1vx people with it, but you are going to two-shot knights, and that helps it a lot. It's still in C tier, though. It's not long enough. It doesn't have a good stab. The spear. I think we all know where the spear's going. Spear's going at the top of S tier for now. Unfortunately, no matter how much they nerf it, the spear's too good. You can go deathless with the spear easily if you play carefully. It's like got all the benefits of a longsword without being as short as the longsword. You can just, you know, the only negative thing about it is the 1vx potential. But you can, if you stay in your backline and only fight in team fights, you're never going to die and you're going to get a bunch of kills. And that's what we're looking for in TO, right? You don't die and you kill everybody. That's what the spear's good at. Stab, 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 stab. And jump stab. Let's see. Next we have the sword. The sword is actually very solid. I think it's better than the falchion. I'm putting it in C tier above the falchion. It's just a basic sword, you know, but it does work. It really does do work. It's fast. It's got good stab, good overhead, good slash. The only thing against it, of course, is that it's short. And that, unfortunately, is going to wreck you in team objective. Your weapon needs to have some length on it in TO. Here we have the two-handed hammer. Now, I used to not like the two-handed hammer because the heavy mace and the two-handed hammer kind of have a feud going on. But I actually think the two-handed hammer, unfortunately, is better than the heavy mace at this point. I've just seen too many people do good with it. I'm putting the two-handed hammer in A tier above the heavy mace. It's kind of like a blunt version of a Dane axe. I'd like to think of it like that. It's got similar speed to a Dane axe, except for it's blunt. So, you know, this is just my opinion, guys. I know a lot of my opinions might make you guys upset, but I don't really care. I do think the two-handed hammer is better than the heavy mace at this point. And let's move on. Next, we have the war axe. Now, the war axe might be hard to place. I think that the war axe is extremely good. I don't know if it's S tier good though. I think it might be top of A tier good. I don't think it's S tier because although it has very good range, better than the battle axe's range, it still doesn't have amazing range. It's better than the battle axe in every way except for damage, but it just doesn't have long enough range. It does have extremely good drags though, and almost every attack on this weapon is good except for the stab. So I am going to put it in A tier, at the top of A tier. It's a good spot for it, I think. We only have 3 options left, and 2 of them are kind of bad. So next we have the warbow, which is actually, it's a bow, so it's bad. I'm not putting the bow, I'm not giving the bows any serious consideration. And we have the war club. The war club I'm putting in C tier. Actually, I think it's B tier. I'm going to put it actually above the cav sword. I know that was a little bit of a flip-flop, but I've seen people do crazy things with this weapon. You can basically, I like to think of it as a pole hammer and a spear. It's got the length of a spear almost, like no one can hit you because it's so long, and it's got amazing stop on hit. It's actually, no, it's like a mix of a glaive, a pole hammer, and a spear. It's got the length of a, actually no, glaive, I'm stupid. It's a glaive and a pole hammer, guys. It's got the length of a glaive, kind of the damage of a glaive, but it's got the hit stop and the damage, extra damage to knights. It's very good at interrupting people. Now, you're not going to get a crazy amount of kills with this weapon, but you could, and you're going to do a lot of work supporting your team with it. So that's why I think it's kind of in this situation. It's very solid, and it's just so long you can't ignore it. And second to last, we have the Warhammer. The Warhammer, of course, a defensive weapon mainly. You wouldn't really use this weapon on attack, but in terms of defense, we are putting this bad boy in S tier. Back of S tier, though. Not top of S tier by any means. I might have to explain this one a little bit, but the Warhammer, in my opinion, is the best defending weapon in the game. It's good it's a good flanking weapon too. You can two-shot pretty much everybody. When people push into you, it's very hard to read. The slashes and overheads look very similar. So a lot of times, you can just do an overhead. They're going to think it's a slash. They're going to go for a slash counter, and they're going to eat like 100 damage to the face and die. The overhead, one of the best overheads in the game in terms of damage. You can't fight it. It's so good in a 1v1 that it's good at 1vxing. I know that's kind of hard to believe, but this weapon is so good in a 1v1 that it's good at 1vxing, because you kill one guy and the other 2 people who are 1vxing you take them out one by one so quickly that they can't actually 1vx fight you. Now, the fact that this is on Guardian is a disadvantage, obviously, because you have very short, very low movement speed on Guardian, which means people are going to be able to surround you and get behind you. But when you're covering the objective correctly with your team and you're not out of position, you are basically going to single-handedly save the objective. That's how good it is. Now, the last weapon is the Golden Dog, which is not on this tier list for some reason. No updated tier list has been released on this website. So I'm just going to put the Golden Dog somewhere. I'm putting the Golden Dog in C tier. I'm putting it in between the pickaxe and the sledgehammer. And here's why. Originally, when the Golden Dog come out, I did make it the best engineer weapon in my video, but after playing with the Golden Dog quite a bit, it's just not there. Unfortunately, it's too slow. It's like a mini maul. It's a maul with even less range than a maul, which just makes it terrible in a lot of ways. It's got that good stab. It's got a very good stab against vanguards, but it's so slow. You can miss an attack, or you can kick somebody. You can literally kick somebody or disarm somebody with the Golden Dog, and they will have enough time to get their riposte up, and then you cannot follow up on your attack. So it's just not worth it. The weapon needs to at least be fast enough to punish people for messing up. And if it's not fast enough to do that, you have a weapon that's only good at hitting people in the back that are already fighting your teammates. So here's my tier list, guys. Let me know if you agree with any of what I said. I know I'm just pulling all of this out of my head. I'm not researching any of it. I've played the game for 3 years now. This is probably the only tier list I'm ever going to release. So yeah, let me know what you think of my tier list. And if you disagree with anything, just let me know in the comment section. And if you want to see more Chivalry stuff, let me know in the comments. I'm still going to be releasing Chivalry content for a while to come. But if Chivalry starts to die, and as we know, the game's not getting any more updates, so it's only a matter of time. But let me know if you want to see more Chivalry content, and I'll keep working on it. But if not, I will start posting videos for other games, you know, and we'll see where it goes. But thank you guys for watching again. Hope you guys have a good day. See you later. Peace out.